This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
France says it will review Mali military presence after junta expels top envoy. The AU suspends Burkina Faso after a coup as ECOWAS delegates begin talks. And China Media Group marks Lunar New Year and welcomes Beijing Winter Olympics in Nairobi. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. And tonight I'm alongside my colleague Uche, who has our business headlines. Uche.
Thank you, Richard. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Bit. Total Energies and the China National Offshore Oil Corporation reach a $10 billion deal for crude oil production in Uganda. And authorities in Egypt raise the minimum wage for public employees for the third time in 3 years. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, back to you, Richard.
Thank you so much, Uche. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. Let's start with news just in. There have been reports of gunfire in the capital, Guinea-Bissau, near a government compound where a cabinet meeting was being held. It is not clear who was behind the gunshots. A security source says the people inside the building have been shot. Others are claiming that 2 people have been killed. There are no confirmations on who the deceased are. West African Regional Bloc ECOWAS, in a statement, has condemned the incident. Guinea-Bissau has experienced several coups and attempted coups since it gained independence in 1974. We will give you more details of these as soon as we get them. And in other news, France says it will decide with EU partners on a future military presence in Mali by mid-February. This after Mali's military rulers expelled the French ambassador Joel Mayer from the country, giving him 72 hours to leave. The French envoy was expelled following comments attributed to the French foreign minister Jean-Yves Le Drian. And on Friday, Le Drian said Mali's transitional government was illegitimate and out of control, remarks the military leaders have described as hostile and outrageous. The latest flare-up comes amid escalating tensions between the West African state and its European partners following 2 coups. Last week, French Defense Minister Florence Parly says French troops would not stay in Mali if the price was too high. Now, still in Mali, where the ruling junta has called on Denmark to withdraw a contingent of troops deployed to the West African nation as part of an international counterterrorism force. The junta, which took power in a coup in 2020, claims that the deployment of about 90 out of more than 100 troops had taken place without its consent. CGTN's Wilkester Nyabwa with the details.
As January drew to an end, Denmark expressed its intention to start pulling its troops out of Mali. Denmark had sent 105 military personnel to Mali on January 18th to join a European Special Forces mission known as Takuba that was set up to help Mali tackle armed groups. It said its troops had deployed after a clear invitation from Mali, but the Malian government said it was surprised by the Danish presence because a decision had yet to be made on a request from Denmark to deploy troops. Denmark's decision to withdraw its troops now comes amid tensions between Mali and its international partners, including regional bodies and the European Union, which threatened to sanction Mali after the military government failed to organize elections following 2 coups. Tensions have also escalated over disputed allegations of deployment of Russian mercenaries to Mali. French Defense Minister Florence Parly said on Saturday that French troops would not stay in Mali if the price was too high. while French Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian called Mali's junta out of control. Mali on Monday gave the French ambassador 72 hours to leave the country after describing comments by the French Foreign Minister about its transitional government as hostile and outrageous. The French Foreign Minister has asserted that the European Military Task Force has agreed to draw up plans on how to adjust their campaign, which covers Mali and the wider Sahel region, to changing circumstances. But she said the ministers from the 15 countries involved in the European Special Force were for now united in wanting to maintain the mission. Wilkesanyabwa, CGTN.
The African Union has suspended Burkina Faso over the country's military coup last week. The bloc says the suspension will last until constitutional order returns. Burkina Faso had already been suspended by the Economic Community of West African States, or ECOWAS. The United Nations and ECOWAS representatives met with ousted President Kabore on Monday. One official says the deposed leader is in good spirits. The ECOWAS delegation also held talks with coup leaders. Meanwhile, the army announced their leader, Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Damiba, as Burkina Faso's new president. The 41-year-old was presented as the head of the patriotic movement for safeguard and restoration, which seized power last week. Damiba says constitutional order will be restored when conditions are right. And in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso's capital, voices rose to decry the suspension of the nation by the AU. Let's take a listen.
ECOWAS and the African Union only intervene when a president is in trouble. They do not intervene when the country is on fire. Is the African Union aware of what we IDPs are going through here? Are they aware of the number of people, sometimes 10 or 20, who die among us every day? Why don't they intervene at this level? Now that the regime of President Kabore has been judged incapable and has been overthrown, they rush to come to Burkina Faso.
The African Union must analyze the problems that plague the sub-region before suspending a country, because the military did not take power because they have arms or for pleasure, but they took arms to meet a crucial need of the moment. This is a security issue, and the politicians or the African Union must have to make sure that this security issue is addressed.
The African Union Heads of State Summit begins this month, a prelude to the AU's 20th anniversary in July. Now, during the conference, 15 new members of the Peace and Security Council will be elected, 5 positions to serve 3-year terms and 10 for 2-year seats. The meeting also provides an opportunity for member states to assess the organization's achievements. The theme this year is building resilience in nutrition on the African continent. This emphasizing that more needs to be done to stabilize food security as well as combat climate change threats. Additionally, 2021 saw the death of thousands of people in war, coupled with military takeovers in at least 4 countries and the continued threat of insecurity. The AU has had difficulties in responding to the challenges, especially those driven by politics, as respective governments cite sovereignty as a reason for non-interference. The body has resorted to sanctions and suspending the membership of some nations. CGTN's Daniel Arab Moy is attending the summit and joins us live on the phone from Addis Ababa. Daniel, thank you for joining us here on Africa Live. The African Union has just suspended Burkina Faso after a military coup there. What other efforts are in place by the continental body to resolve the situation in Burkina Faso? Daniel?
Well, thank you very much, Richard. Yes, indeed, the African Union suspended Burkina Faso after a military coup in the country. And of course, after the suspension, another method or another strategy that we are seeing the African Union taking is sitting down with the warring parties, to try to amicably discuss and come up with a resolution that could determine a win-win situation for both sides. Now, but analysts here in Addis Ababa and, of course, across much of the African continent do say that the suspension of Burkina Faso and many other African countries, especially in the west of the continent where these coups have recently taken place, may not necessarily resolve the issues that the people or the military have seen, thus taking over power militarily. Many people do believe that for Africa to settle and have the peace that they desire, the leaders, the African Union, the ECOWAS, must come together and try to address the issues. Why is Africa seeing these coups happening so many times? You know, in the recent past, you've seen in Mali, we've seen in Guinea, Burkina Faso suspended. So they are saying that Africa must come together and sit and resolve the issues that lead to military coups. And we are talking about poverty here. You know, we are talking about issues of malnutrition, or all these many other issues that the continent faces are leading to these crises that we're seeing across the continent. So Africans are saying, analysts are saying that African Union need to try to address these rather than just suspending countries that may not necessarily resolve the issue at hand. Richard.
All right, Daniel Aramoy, let's leave it there for now. Thank you so much for that update and report. We appreciate your analysis. You're watching Africa Live. More news after the break. Stay tuned. Ukraine to increase size of the country's armed forces by 100,000 over the next 3 years.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Aden, Tunis, Cairo,
Syria,
Juba, Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. The Tunisian Interior Ministry says it has foiled a terrorist attack on a tourist resort by a 22-year-old woman who was trained by the terrorist organization ISIL in Syria. Now, this individual was arrested at the Tunis-Carthage airport on January the 10th on her return from Turkey. Since 2013, over 3,000 Tunisians have joined ISIL in war zones, including women and children, according to the Interior Ministry. Danish has the details.
The Tunisian Interior Ministry says the suspected terrorist left for Turkey in the summer of 2020 before heading to Syria in 2021 with the help of a Syrian national. In Syria, she joined a terrorist group and began training for suicide bombing. During her stay in Syria, the suspect met with a Tunisian terrorist who planned to provide her with an explosive belt once she returns to Tunisia.
Arresting the Tunisian terrorist girl who came from Syria proves that our intelligence and security services are extremely vigilant. The operation started when she was still abroad. Tunisia is winning the war on terrorism, but needs more effort and means to eradicate this dangerous phenomenon.
Hundreds of Tunisian women and children live in Syrian refugee camps for the families of ISIL members. Some children have lost both parents during the Syrian civil war. Their families in Tunisia are calling for their immediate repatriation.
My daughter joined her husband in Syria. He died while she is now in a refugee camp with her 4 children. I also have a son who is in prison in Syria. He has 2 young daughters. We call on our state to repatriate them.
My daughter and her husband died in Syria, and their 2 children live alone in a refugee camp.
The boy is 8 and the girl is 6. They are sick. They did not commit any crime. We want them back to raise them in Tunisia.
Analysts explain that the successive governments have turned a blind eye to this problem. Tunisia has not found a solution for returnees from conflict zones, including ISIL members, as well as their spouses and children.
Many terrorist girls and women were trained in conflict zones on using arms and explosives. They pose a threat to national security and cannot be treated as ordinary people. Terrorists remain dangerous even if they claim otherwise. However, the Tunisian state must deal with their children in a humanitarian manner. The children should not pay for the mistakes of their parents.
Security experts assert that the Tunisian state needs to put in place a special program to deal with hundreds of returnees from ISIL who should be tried and jailed for joining a terrorist organization. However, children need psychological assistance in order to pave the way for social integration. The Interior Ministry revealed that the 22-year-old woman who was arrested last week for planning a suicide bombing on a tourist resort was in contact with a local terrorist. This individual is in jail over involvement in planning terrorist acts against senior state officials in late 2021. Abdel Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Authorities in Kenya have launched investigations into an attack in the country's northeastern province of Mandera. At least 10 people were killed after a minibus taxi known as a matatu drove over an improvised explosive device. The vehicle is said to have been ferrying an unknown number of passengers. Local media reports indicate that one suspect has been detained for being allegedly involved in the attack. Police suspect Al-Shabaab militants operating in the area are responsible for the assault.
We had a vehicle flying Arabia to Mandera town, ferrying passengers, or reaching at a place called Nta. The vehicle runs over an ID which was placed inside a culvert. Unfortunately, when it ran over the ID which was placed under the culvert, it exploded. It was actually a double one, exploded, and unfortunately we have lost life. So I think when the vehicle was so overloaded, there was a big number than it is required.
We responded very fast with the ambulances, and we mobilized the team, the medical doctors, the nurses, and everybody. We managed to stabilize them. In total, there are about 13 casualties. We are trying to stabilize the rest of the patients. 4 of them which are critically injured. 2 is already in data, and we hope to stabilize all of them.
For more on this, we are joined by Mohammed Dagar, Regional Coordinator, Eastern Africa Institute for Security Study. He joins us via Zoom from Nairobi. Mohammed, welcome to the program. Talk to us about how IED tragedies have been an endless tale in Kenya's Mandera country. Over to you, Mohammed. Well, we apologize for that break in communication. We've lost Mohammed there. Hopefully we'll get him back in just a little while. In other news, Ukraine's president has announced he will increase the size of the country's armed forces by 100,000 over the next 3 years. Volodymyr Zelensky has also promised to increase salaries and pensions in a sweeping new package that will improve the living conditions for the country's military. Now, this comes as hundreds of thousands of Russian soldiers remain close to Ukrainian borders. In the east of the country, where Ukraine soldiers have been fighting separatists suspected of receiving Russian support since 2014, there residents are somewhat apathetic about the prospects of a potential new war. Natalie Carney reports from East Ukraine.
Sergei has kept pigeons since he was in school, nursing each new egg as his own child. Since 2014, when fighting between the Ukrainian army and separatists broke out just 2 kilometers away, he has found even more solace in caring for his birds.
They do help me, a lot of times. Any crisis, I go to the dove house. I sit here on the bench. I feed them. They coo in return. and you leave the dove house happy.
Avdiivka has been one of the hot spots in the ongoing tensions in the east of the country. The fighting has affected the economic conditions here. Jobs are sparse and many of the buildings have been damaged by shelling. Reminders of the 8-year-long conflict are never far away.
On January the 29th, 2017, a battle broke out between separatist forces and the Ukrainian army stationed near Avdiivka. That fighting lasted for 5 days. In the end, 10 Ukrainian soldiers and many civilians were killed. Dozens had been injured in what is still being considered one of the deadliest battles since 2014. Now, 5 years on, and residents here are still worried about the potential of war.
In general, daily life continues as usual, with many remaining philosophical about the prospect of conflict on their doorstep.
After a 24-hour shift at work, there was shelling. The building was shaking. The walls were dancing. One glazing went off. I stood and thought, it doesn't matter which side it will come from.
Of the 100,000 or so soldiers Russia has amassed along its border with Ukraine, many are close to Ukraine's separatist area, an area many believe to be supported by Moscow. Semiko Ilya's house was completely destroyed when fierce fighting broke out around Donetsk airport. Yet he doesn't believe Russia is planning to invade his country.
Я думаю, что ничего не будет.
I do not believe anything will happen. There will be no offensive. This is all to hit Ukrainian economics. It loses a lot because of the panic. It's just to make panic, and Ukraine loses billions of dollars.
А Украина теряет сколько миллиардов долларов.
Moscow has repeatedly said it has no intention of starting a war, but insists Ukraine will never join NATO. While world leaders lay out warnings and red lines in this potential conflict, people here are watching and waiting to see how this crisis plays out. Natalie Carney, CGTN, Avdiivka, East Ukraine.
All right, let's revisit the story on Kenyan security, where authorities have launched investigations into an attack in the country's northeastern province of Mandera. At least 10 people were killed in the incident. For more on this, we are joined again by Mohammed Dagra. We lost communication earlier, but we've got him right back. Thank you, Mohammed, for standing by. He's a coordinator of Eastern Africa at the Institute for Security Studies. He joins us via Zoom. Mohammed, it appears IED tragedies have become an endless tale in Kenya's Mandera County. Why is that?
Well, Richard, not only in Mandera, but any Kenyan county that borders Somalia, and that includes Lamu. Broadly, we analyze this because of 4 reasons as to why this ID tragedy is very rampant in some of these border counties. And first and foremost is that Kenya's inability to secure its borders makes the ferrying of terror merchants from Somalia very rampant. Second is that while the script of terrorism might be written in Somalia, the play is actually done by the large homegrown terror that is present in Kenya, including Jaish al-Ayman or some of the splinter cells that operate in some of these counties like Mandera. And they might be the ones who are responsible in planting some of these ordinances or IEDs. Third is that these areas are prone to have very large ungoverned spaces. And lastly, is that removing IEDs, as the world has really shown us in countries like Vietnam, Timor-Leste, Laos, is not an easy task. And it is clear that Kenya either doesn't have a strategy in place to combat some of these IEDs, or actually the strategies are actually not working, because if they were working, then some of these incidences could not be taking place.
All right, Mohammed, I'd like to pick up on some of the points you've just made. You spoke of securing borders. Now, there are those that have described northeastern Kenya as a theater of al-Shabaab operations. What will it take to secure not just Mandera, but Wajir and Garissa? What are the solutions?
I think top of my head, Richard, it's actually, normally in Kenya, we have 2 levels of government. We have the national government and we have the county governments based on what you have just outlined them, that is Mandera, Garissa, what have you. And in most cases, these 2 levels of government don't work together. They speak in tongues. One talks the other thing and the other one talks the other thing when it comes to issues of fighting terrorism. You can see that the governor talks on one thing and the Minister for Security here in Nairobi talks about another thing. And second, which is most important, is that communities here are really at limbo. We have communities being victims of Al-Shabaab and also being victims of state excesses like profiling, extrajudicial killings. And communities here are really, really important to be at the center stage in any anti-terrorism initiatives that both the county and the national government put in place. And lastly, Richard, is really these areas have been marginalized. Development, from the development perspective, they have been marginalized for decades and decades. You know, it is time to have affirmative actions in these areas that can bring the economic boom in some of these places. You know, complete that wall that you're talking about with Somalia, build those schools, build those police stations that would enhance policing and patrolling of law enforcement agencies.
All right, Mohammed Dagar, thank you for your insight and analysis. Thank you for speaking to us. We appreciate it. Let's turn our attention now to South Africa, where the country is in its peak malaria season, but many malaria cases are being misdiagnosed as COVID-19. And that's become malaria and COVID-19 have similar specific early symptoms. Those include fever, chills, headaches, fatigue, and muscle pain. Undiagnosed and untreated, malaria rapidly progresses to severe illness with a potentially fatal outcome. Angela Coppola has the story.
Malaria has been on the decline for the past 2 years due to those COVID-19 travel restrictions. That's all changing now.
But with the rains, reduction in travel restrictions, we found people are traveling a lot more, going to malaria endemic areas, and we're seeing cases go up. And added to the cases going up, what we have noticed is that there have been quite a few increases in cases in severe malaria, first of all, and then in the endemic areas, more concerningly, quite a few deaths have been reported. And when we do the investigation into both the severe malaria as well as the deaths, what we are noticing is that it's either very late diagnosis or misdiagnosis at the initial stages.
Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Botswana, and Eswatini have been identified as the high-risk neighbours. South African provinces bordering those countries are also at risk. And that includes Limpopo, Northern KwaZulu-Natal, and Mpumalanga.
You know, obviously mosquitoes don't observe any borders, and so they can move. And what we have found, and it's something that's been reported for years, and it's called, sometimes you can hear it as airport malaria. So mosquito would be traveling caught in a bag, or in South Africa or in Africa, what we find is the mosquito gets caught in a truck or in a taxi that is crossing borders, and it will come from an endemic area, move into a most likely a non-endemic area, and then when it gets released, it's going to be really hungry, and it's going to bite the first person that it sees.
Healthcare professionals have an important role to play in malaria detection.
In the case of taxi malaria, if they see the patient getting progressively sicker and they can't diagnose anything else, just do a malaria test. So we definitely want people to do a malaria test if they've been in an endemic area and start treatment as soon as possible. And what we do want the patients to do, if they started treatment, to finish the course completely.
According to the WHO's latest World Malaria Report, there were an estimated 627,000 malaria deaths worldwide in 2020. Sub-Saharan Africa accounted for 96% of those deaths, and about 80% of those deaths are among children under 5. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, the news continues on Africa Live. Time now for our business segment with Uche. Over to you, Uche.
Thanks, Richard. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. Total Energies and the China National Offshore Oil Corporation reach a $10 billion deal for crude oil production in Uganda. And authorities in Egypt raised the minimum wage for public employees for the third time in 3 years.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's start off in Uganda. Total Energies and the China National Offshore Oil Corporation have reached a deal for a crude oil production project in the country. Now, the two companies will invest more than $10 billion in the project to cover the development of oil fields and also processing facilities. It will also provide for a pipeline network in Uganda and an export pipeline through Tanzania to carry crude to a port on the Indian Ocean. Now, the announcement was made by Total Energies Chief Executive Patrick Puyan on Tuesday and also broadcast on television. Uganda discovered crude oil reserves near its border with the Democratic Republic of Congo in 2006. However, production has been repeatedly delayed by disagreements between the government and oil firms over tax and development strategies and a lack of infrastructure. While still on Total Energies, the company aims to restart a $20 billion liquefied natural gas project in the north of Mozambique this year. Now, the project was halted following an attack on the town of Palma by an insurgent group with links to Islamic State almost a year ago. Well, Chief Executive Patrick Puyan said that the project will restart once he sees that life is back to normal in the town, meaning a return of state services and the people. Now, Puyan visited Mozambique on Monday. He also signed a deal to train 2,500 young Mozambicans in a way that will help them contribute to the project. The young people will do such things as growing vegetables that they can also sell to feed workers on the project. Of course, Total Energies had intended for the project to produce its first cargo in 2024. Well, let's head to Ghana now. The country's Monetary Policy Committee has held the benchmark interest rate at 14.5%, all in a bid to assess the impact of the previous hike. It has also further urged the government to implement proposed spending cuts to moderate inflation in the country. At the same time, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank both say that the nation is at high risk of debt distress, and this could further complicate its plans for borrowing, especially from international capital markets. Here's CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai reporting from Accra.
Ghana wants to borrow $750 million from the international capital market, with the option of further increasing by another $750 million to fund this year's budget expenditure. But the World Bank says sub-Saharan African countries, including Ghana, may find it difficult to borrow from the international market due to high debt portfolio and debt sustainability concerns. Ghana's total debt is currently more than $54 billion, about 78% of its gross domestic product. Still, the government says it has met with investors to assure them of the need to support Ghana's economic recovery.
Altogether, these investors have assets under management in excess of over $4 trillion. They also actively participate and hold Eurobonds, and they've been all following keenly Ghana's development story. As a government, we felt it necessary to speak directly with our investors and assure them of the steady progress being made towards economic rebound, anchored on fiscal consolidation and debt sustainability.
Analysts, however, believe the government's move is unsustainable.
The problem with this, though, is that it crowds out funding for the private sector. The more the government borrows, the less money there is for the private sector. The less money there is for the private sector, there's less access to finance, interest rates go up, and the litany of woes continue.
Analysts want the government to widen the tax net in order to raise enough revenue for its expenditure. According to the government's data, out of Ghana's 12 million working population who are eligible to pay tax, only 2 million pay their taxes.
We collect so little tax. That's why we are running those budget deficits year in, year out. And our issue is so poor that the tax revenue doesn't even cover recurrent expenditure.
Ghana is introducing a 1.5% tax on mobile money payments and electronic bank transfers called e-levy to shore up revenue generation. The government says it will also cut its budget expenditure by 20% to tackle the deficit. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
Meanwhile, in Egypt, authorities have raised the minimum wage for public employees and civil servants for the third time in 3 years. Now, the decision will result in the increase in minimum wage and pensions by an average of 13%. Here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim with more from Cairo.
The minimum wage for public employees and civil servants announced by the Egyptian president has more than doubled to reach $173 from $77 since 2019.
These measures are meant to relieve the burden of Egyptians, putting into consideration that we continue our economic reforms that are aimed at developing and rebuilding the country, not adding more burden on the people.
The move that targets over 5 million employees has been welcomed by many Egyptians.
It is a very good decision to help the poor cover their expenses. This is targeting the poor who can provide for themselves or pay for their basic needs.
And experts believe it has come at the right time.
The state in the last 5 years has been applying its development plans, such as the infrastructure projects and economic transformation with IMF support. This has put a lot of pressure on Egyptian citizens, and therefore the state is trying to fend off some of these challenges. We've seen the inflationary effects of the pandemic lately, an increase in prices, which has widened the gap between income and expenses.
The minimum wage rise is only for public sector and civil servants. That's why not everyone was happy.
We want the same for the private sector. There are more privileges in the public sector like annual leave, a fixed income, health insurance and all. It is a good decision. I wish it would apply on the private sector.
The government says it has given the private sector a 6-month delay after businesses complained that any salary raise would affect revenues already damaged by the fallout of the coronavirus pandemic. The salary increase is part of a set of social security initiatives launched by the government to improve living conditions for middle and low-income earners.
There are 4 main sectors that eat a big chunk of public expenditure. The state expenditures on pensions and salaries increased by 77%, health around 31%, and education and wages as well as the Dignified Life Initiative.
Meanwhile, the government has not ruled out a set of salary increases of another 10% in the next fiscal year 2022-2023. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Well, let's head to South Africa now, where miner AngloGold Ashanti says that it expects its annual earnings to slump by up to 42%. It attributes the drop to lower gold sales, increased inflationary pressures, and pandemic-fueled impact on costs. Now, the gold miner says it expects headline earnings per share, which is the main profit measure in South Africa, to come in at between $1.37 and $1.53 for the year ending December 31st, 2021. Of course, last year, the company reported headline earnings per share of $2.38. South Africa's top miner reiterated its previous annual output forecast of 2.4 million ounces compared to the 3.04 million ounces which it produced in the previous year. Now, the impact on production last year due to the coronavirus crisis was estimated at about 47 kilo ounces. It mainly affected the company's operations in Ghana, Brazil, and Argentina. And now a story about perseverance, determination, and a driving ambition to start a business and make it grow. We speak to a Zimbabwean immigrant who left Harare in search of a better life in South Africa. Here's Angela Coppola, who spent some time with Tinashe Nyamudoka.
Tinashe's story has all the ingredients of a fairy tale. He left Harare and travelled to Cape Town in 2008 looking for a job. He started in a bakery and soon realized he could make more money working in a restaurant.
So I started studying wine with the aim of being able to upsell and make more money in a restaurant. And yeah, I think, once you start learning about wine, I just got intrigued. And since I was excelling in selling, one of the managers suggested I do a wine course with the Cape Wine Academy. And yeah, that began the journey of studying to be a sommelier.
Tinashe talks about the deep roots, heritage, relationships and history of the wine farms in South Africa and Germany. It's what drew him to wine and the determination to create his own wine brand. He also did a wine business course.
So growing up, I've always had this inborn thing just to prove myself, and I know writing in my journals, I've always wanted to run a successful business. So I just saw an opportunity in terms of wine appreciation and discovering new markets.
Breaking into the wine industry can be daunting. Information is key, and you need to know how to enter the market, the process, and understand the legislation. Not having studied winemaking didn't count in his favor.
That process obviously took months for me to then end up with a partner I'm working with now at Opstal Winery, Artie, who was like, okay, I can show you all the nitty-gritty details. All you need to do is, be able to blend the wines and have a wine label in the name. And once you have it, the other initial challenge was because I don't have any history or wine connection with the land. So firstly, trying to convince people in the industry that I could do this and, I could package a product and selling it was quite an issue, and still up to now, some people are skeptical.
Part of any business development process is the branding. It's critical. It's why he went to his roots.
I'll smell a Merlot, for instance. Then I pick up Masao. I'll be like, okay, this is a Merlot. What do they say in European terms? Black currants, blackberries, cherries, and I'll ace my tasting exams. So when I was coming up with a name, I was like, if the wine is always taking me home to my roots, I might as well call it Kumusha. So Kumusha is a Zimbabwean Shona name, which can either mean your roots, your home, or your origins.
The hard work is beginning to pay off.
I'm exporting biggest market, the United States, launching in the UK. But I'm excited because I've got a shipment going to China, which is a nice taster, and hopefully it grows big because South African wines are really being impressed in China, especially the Chenin Blanc.
It's all about having a vision, having a mission, and staying focused on getting the job done. If you have the passion, you can achieve anything you really want to. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz, but coming up later on Global Business Africa, Nigeria's budget deficit is set to rise following the government's decision to retain the costly petrol subsidy. Of course, all that coming up top of the hour. For now, let's head into a short break, but do stay with us. My colleague Richard Nta will be back with more news after this.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. We appreciate your company. Artists in Uganda have joined in celebrations to mark the Chinese New Year festival. The artists staged a live performance in Mandarin, the Chinese language. They fused Ugandan songs and dances with Chinese ones to express their love to the Chinese people. The artists sent greetings and expressed solidarity in shared cultures.
We want to introduce to the Chinese market our culture. We want to introduce to the Chinese market our sounds, the sounds of Uganda, the music of Uganda. That's why we did Chinese songs with traditional Ugandan music. That's why we did them in the Ugandan costumes, so that the colors we are beginning to access the Chinese market.
It means now the Ugandan music or Ugandan creative art has crossed borders. People in China will be watching the Ugandans singing in Chinese language. People in China will be happy to see that there are people who also follow their culture, just like they follow our culture. There are so many similarities between China and Uganda. Like in business, people are doing business together. In culture, we have to do things together.
African leaders are sending in their New Year wishes to China. Tuesday marks the first day of the Year of the Tiger, according to the Chinese lunar calendar. Let's listen in to the messages from Babangida Njoroge, the chairman of the Nigerian Investment Promotion Commission, and Felix Mutati, Zambia's Minister for Technology and Science.
I wish them Happy New Year, prosperous New Year of the Tiger, and I wish them well. We look on China as our big brother to assist, and so many other important projects like the Route Belt Initiative that talks about connectivity, like the railway system that currently China are doing. So I think that would go a long way in promoting economic growth and development in the country.
I wish to extend on behalf of the government and the people of Zambia our most heartfelt wishes for good health and happiness for all of you and to the friendly people of the People's Republic of China. I also wish to take this opportunity to congratulate the government and the people of China for their impressive success in transforming the country into a digital economy.
All right, let's revisit our top story. There have been reports of gunfire in the capital of Guinea-Bissau near the government compound where a cabinet meeting was being held. It is not clear who was behind the gunshots. A security source says that people inside the building have been shot. Others are claiming that 2 people have been killed. There are no confirmations as to who the deceased are. Now, let's cross to our CGTN correspondent, Alan Ambalo, in the Bissau capital of Guinea-Bissau. Alan, thank you for joining us here on the program. Alan, give us some clarity on what is going on in Guinea-Bissau.
Yes, that started in this starting of the afternoon around 12:30 local time, when a group of soldiers tried just to attack the palace of the government where the head of state was just leading a cabinet meeting. And they just was face to face to the presidential guards and some soldiers around. There was a very heavy shooting, and after these soldiers, there was some guys coming from other barracks close to the airport that come to join them and to try to reinforce their positions. At least it takes time around 3 quarters of an hour before just being shutting out. And there is a reinforcement coming also to at least to help the head of state. At the moment where I'm talking to you, I joined the head of state by phone. He told me I am okay. I'm just leaving the palace of the government to go to State House. And I saw him passing 5 minutes ago, going just under heavy escort to the State House.
All right, Alan, let's leave it there for now. Thank you so much for that update and report. There you have it. Reports of gunfire around the government building in Guinea-Bissau. Well, the news continues on Africa Live. We're not done just yet. We've got your sports news coming up after the break. Stay tuned.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, welcome along to Sport on Africa Live with me, Richard Nta.